Thank you for attending this press conference. I just got off the phone with Prime Minister Mark Phillips. As you know, he was in the Pomeroon yesterday as part of a government's outreach to Region 2. So I was getting a report from him about his interaction with the communities in the Pomeroon River. And what he told me is very consistent with my findings on the Essequibo Coast, where I also spent a couple of days. The Minister of Agriculture accompanied the Prime Minister in the Pomeroon. And he said to me that the farmers and the residents are very pleased with the work that we've been doing in the area to try to address issues of flooding. Now, that cannot be prevented totally, but you would recall earlier in our term, just after COVID, the president went to that area, and the residents raised this age-old issue about the flow of the Pomeroon River, and that it was blocked. The channel was blocked at the mouth of the river, and it was affecting issues like drainage in the river. We have done quite a bit and spent a significant amount of money in dredging the mouth of the river. And it's quiet work, it's unheralded work, and sometimes it goes unnoticed. But the residents of the Pomeroon noticed it. They told the Prime Minister that at low tide, the water goes down in the river, gets very low, and as a consequence of the clearing of the mouth of the river. So we're hoping that this would alleviate some of the flooding that residents face in the area. We also, since we assumed office, we have given the residents of the Pomeroon 2 pontoons and 2 excavators that work all the time in the Pomeroon River to help them with drainage work and also empouldering of their farms. And over the past several years, that has assisted a large number of farmers to better tackle the issue of drainage and empouldering their lands to save their crops. And many have now gone into production because of the assistance from the government. And this is fully funded by the government of Guyana. But the excavators are managed by committees that operate in the river, one for Lower Pomeroon and one for Upper Pomeroon. When I was there, we had promised an additional 2 excavators, and those are on their way now. And within a couple of weeks, they would be engaged in work and add to the work we've already done in the Pomeroon for drainage and irrigation. The farmers in the Pomeroon have also raised the issue with the Prime Minister of planting material. And I met the rice farmers and the cash crop farmers in Anna Regina too, a large number of them. And so they were extremely pleased with the work we have done on drainage and irrigation. Last year, over $1 billion was spent on drainage and irrigation. Right now, we have over $2.4 billion of work ongoing in the region for drainage and irrigation. If you listen to you view the footage of the meeting, you would see the farmers were very positive about the work that the government is doing. Because you know, drainage and irrigation is the lifeblood of farming. And in the last government, they just cut the farm to market roads and the budget and the D&I budget for the entire country, apart from increasing taxes on implements, fertilizer, pesticides, machinery and equipment, increased land and water charges, etc., which had a detrimental effect on farming. We have removed all of those, but we have also been reinvesting in drainage and irrigation, not just for farming, but also to alleviate flooding in the built-up areas. I had the opportunity to outline to the residents in Essequibo how we are funding a lot of these activities. It's from sale of our forest carbon, not necessarily from budgetary resources or revenue. Well, it's budgetary resources, but not coming from revenue. It's coming from a different sort of revenue from the sale of forest carbon. So it's financed. Outlined about the 60 cocas that we plan to rehabilitate across the country, the 40 mobile pumps that we're buying, the 19 pump stations that we're building that would have 39 pumps, major pumps installed across the country, the 2 Hope-like canals in Region 5 and 6, a massive plan to ensure that we are climate resilient and we also improve drainage and irrigation for our farmers, which could lead to a massive increase in output of agricultural products for our country and more income for our farmers. So they were very pleased about the work and the support that they're getting. Most of the farmers, even on the coast, they wanted more planting material. We outlined that we now just contracted a group to do a tissue culture lab that could do 4 million plants. It's from India, the Terry Institute, that will come and build out the tissue culture lab that will do 4 million plants a year. We probably will get another tissue culture lab. We're expanding all of our nurseries. The nursery at Charity is inadequate to service the needs of the people there. In places like the Amerindian communities, they want to expand cultivation. Dartmouth, we promised to give assistance to the farmers there. They have cleared 340 acres of land. In some of the Amerindian communities, they want to go in large-scale production of passion fruit. They already have market. So we'll be providing a lot of planting material for them. The rice farmers were pleased that the support we gave when we reduced the commission at GRDB last year to ensure that they got a higher price for their paddy, and they've been getting a lot of assistance through fertilizers, etc. They have an infestation of paddy bug there, and we're working with them to give them chemicals and to spray the area. Hopefully that the paddy bug will not have a big impact on the output of the rice crop this year. So a lot of work being done with the farmers across Essequibo Coast, but this is taking place in other regions too. But I want to focus on Essequibo Coast because that's the outreach there. And you know that region, most of its income comes from farming. So that's why a heavy focus there on farming, including cash crop, not just the other, like rice. I met with the business community there too, and also young people. But the business community reinforced the need that we heard from the farmers themselves for processing facilities. You know, we're building two call centers by the state, by the government in Essequibo, so that we can get private operators similar to what we're doing in Berbice, Region 5, what we did in Region 10, to generate more employment in the outlying areas, to bolster what we have done through the part-time jobs, and then to shift more permanent type of jobs to these outlying communities. Because most of the jobs, the new jobs being generated are here in Region 4 and Region 3. These are the two regions that generate more of the non-agriculture types of jobs. So we heard uniformly about the need for processing, and we're supporting the business community and the farmers to move from just producing to processing through co-investing. If you look at the budget, we set aside some funds for co-investing in business ventures, and we have done so today, and it has brought great benefit to the communities. Just to give you an example, like when Region 9 had the extended drought, and they had a shortage of farine because the cassava plant died out. We discovered by chance that Region 3 had had a massive output of cassava, and they didn't have markets for it. And when we actually checked it, it was 2 million pounds that they had produced, and they can easily go to 6 million pounds of cassava. So and the farmers are ready there. So we could easily put up a processing facility there, to do a number of things with the cassava, including making cassava flour to blend with the other flour, the wheat flour made from wheat, and so many other products. And so that's what we're exploring there in these areas. So it's not just because, we made it clear we want the economy to remain diversified, because in most oil-producing countries, they lose all of the other sectors and come to heavily rely on the oil industry alone. And then when the fortunes of that industry wane, they suffer enormous loss of welfare. We don't want that to happen in Guyana's case. So that's why this big effort on diversification. So we are going to support the industry. The Minister Onage will go back to meet the people from the Chamber of Commerce in Essequibo and the other business community. There's a big push to expand tourism in that region, and they needed a lot of help on training and regulation and this sort of stuff. So that was promised. And the young people too, I met with a large number of young people, maybe 600 of them. And we've been pushing people to study. So I was a bit surprised that of about 600 people I met, not all of them were, or a limited number were making use of the Gold Scholarship and the other scholarship programs. So what I promised is to have Minister Hamilton through the BIT and the Ministry of Human Services through the WIN program, and then Professor Opadair, who runs the GOAL and the GROW program for us, to go back into the region to meet with the young people, and Minister Ashni Singh will accompany them to push a lot of the young people. I believe it's because there isn't enough an outreach, and people need that little nudging to apply for the programs, because a lot of them said, when I explore in the interaction with them, I want to study this subject. And then they're all offered under the Gold Scholarship program, and it's online, but they don't know. So I think we need to do a bit more of that, to work with young people to get consistent with our commitment to invest in education, to expand, and to pay for any scholarship that any Guyanese will get in these areas through the GOLD program. We will pay, or one of the other programs I just mentioned. We will fully fund those. So this expansion you will see on the Essequibo coast. And then I met also with the contractors and the regional administration, with the Ministry of Finance staff and the Minister of Finance. And we laid out basically how we intend to, what we expect of the tendering authorities in the system when they manage the budget, and what our expectations are of the contractors. So from the region's perspective, they need to comply with the Procurement Act fully and the regulations to that act. There's no room for departure from that act unless they get the explicit approval of the NPTAP and the Ministry of Finance. too often we have found departures from the standard bidding documents that are part of our legislation. And because there are so many procuring entities around the country, hundreds of them at different levels, departmental level, ministerial level, in public corporations, in semi-autonomous agencies, in statutory bodies, and the central ministries, sometimes they're, depending on who is the procuring officer, who heads the procurement system, they can alter the bidding document, which should be standard. That should not happen. And so they asked for more training because they said there is a high turnover of staff often. And therefore, a lot of people are doing this because they need better training. And so we're committing to better training of the staff who are doing procurement and to make sure that they have a clear understanding of what our expectations are and how the system should operate. It should be fair. We also have embarked nationwide and we started in various regions that they have to know who the people are. There are some contractors who, through their families, who own multiple companies, wife, children, everybody, and they come and bid. You don't know who they are because they're companies. So, and then you can end up with maybe a single family putting in 3 different bids or 4 different bids, and often they win contracts. And then the community knows who they are, but we don't know because they come through the veil of the company. So they have to examine this carefully, the regions. They have to start cleansing the list, and people have to start declaring their interests. There are some public servants who have companies. They should, if you're bidding, and there's no prohibition if you work for government to bid in a contract, but you should not do so in an entity that is connected to you, etc. And so we are enforcing that so that you can't prejudice the bid process. We have had cases where people who have done bad work and continue to get contracts and continue to do bad work, so that that is something that you have to look at. And so we've outlined several of the criteria, spoke with the region and the contractors. People sometimes from outside the region, we will try as far as possible in every region to have the regional budgets go to contractors from that region. So if it's region 10, the people in region 10 should be able to benefit the contractors there. So we laid this out, and then we had a tough talk with the contractors too, that we intend to rigidly enforce the law. We expect good quality work, and we intend to blacklist people who do shoddy work. So what we did there in region 2, we're going to replicate across the country. The Ministry of Finance will go across the country to ensure that on all the procuring authorities, whether it's not just there, but in every ministry, that they are aware of this, and that departures would have from established procedures will have consequences. This is, in a nutshell, what took place in Region 2. In the last couple of days, we spent like a couple of days up there talking to people. But it should have applicability to other regions too, because whatever I said here is going to be enforced in other regions of the country here, particularly as it relates to cash crop, to contracts and the award of contracts. So we've seen almost every week when we think we give an explanation here, about our attempts to tackle the complex task of managing the economy of this country in this period when the decisions that you make today will have far-reaching implications on the future. And we have outlined the principles that we are trying to observe as we navigate this new period, particularly with the beginning of the influx of oil money. And we've made it clear that there are some things that we wish to avoid. The dreaded Dutch disease, that is a change in relative prices, that has plagued countries that have produced, have had windfall revenue, particularly coming from the oil and gas sector. If you look around the world, it's replete with examples of those countries that fell by the wayside, although they are oil-producing countries. We've outlined that principle, that is a key principle that we want to observe. And that is why this dedicated focus on keeping our exchange rate competitive and the assistance to the non-oil sectors so that we keep a diversified economy. Clearly, this principle sometimes gets lost when I read editorials and newspaper articles and when I listen to the opposition. We lose sight of this principle when you hear the pronouncements they make about how we should approach, well, not approach a task of even management, but spending of revenue at this point in time. The second key principle that we've outlined in managing the economy is sustainability. And for you to be sustainable over the medium and long term, you have to select some policy options now that are not populist but well thought out, that would yield massive benefits to our people over time, and those benefits would be lasting. They're not just a little blip on the radar for a short period. And that is why you've seen we've outlined environmental sustainability, so hence the focus on climate proofing our economy, making our economy and the sectors of our economy more resilient to climate change, adding the variable of climate change to our development equation, which many countries have not done. We have done that here, and therefore we have selected, you can see it, it's consistent with long-term sustainability. The second thing is a focus on investing today in those sectors that yield long-term benefits. Education, expansion of education, free education, training of our people, so better skilled Guyanese so they can earn more in the future. Expanding healthcare now, investing in healthcare, so we have more long-term sustainability, putting in place the economic infrastructure that will bring in non-oil investments and make our economy less reliant on oil, so highways, power plants, water management facilities, including the massive expansion in treated water, etc. These things are vital for long-term management of the economy. And then, in this period, the most crucial struggle that most countries have had in all of this issue, or navigating these complex issues, is how to avoid the short-term consequences of the mismatch between the supply of goods and services and the demand for goods and services in an economy that is roaring, because our economy today is growing at high double digits, unlike any country in the world. And this is an economic phenomenon that you cannot get away from. Whether any party is in government, or you can't defy the law of economics, that there is an upward pressure on price movement because the demand for goods and services far outstrip the supply of it. So for example, if we have a massive building boom now, the demand for sand and stone will outstrip our ability to supply the sand and stone. So what happens? Prices go up. You can, in an economy that is not developing, you don't have any demand for it because nobody is building, like in the period under APNU. If you drove on the East Bank, the same area that is a hive of activities, when Irfan Ali was minister, it was booming. Then in the opposition period, a night we drove down at the back of all the roads that we had built in Eccles under that period. And the roads were overgrown, and all the few heaps of sand that we saw there were overgrown with weed and bush. If you go back to East Bank now, you see a totally different picture. Roads being done, new buildings of every nature, commercial buildings, hotels going up, housings being built. You just contrast the two periods. So there was no upward pressure for the price of sand in that period because nobody was using it or aggregate. And this is the law of economics. How are we trying to navigate this period now? We've been pushing to open up more government-owned sand pits. We have licensed 6 new, given them licenses to do aggregate supply. We have another 6 quarries now operating now. So the price of stone, which stone was scarce, it was $10,000 per ton aggregates when we got in. It jumped to $15,000. We couldn't even get it. Now it's down back to $10,000 because of the increase in supply, because of our government's action. So it is navigating a complex period when you have growth, that you tend to have higher inflation, and the economy, they call it overheating of the economy. Look at how we have managed this. And I'm really proud of this, not because we did it, but because as a country, we have been able, with double-digit growth in our economy, which unlike any other country, our inflation rate is lower than the average inflation rate of most countries in the world and in this hemisphere. Our inflation rate is still lower. And I'll tell you why that has happened. And it's linked directly to government policies. This is no small task or no small achievement of a government to be able to grow at the rates at which we're growing, and the demand for goods and services, the pace at which we're growing, and still keep your average inflation rate lower than your counterparts that are not growing at all. Some of them, look at the growth rates, in anemic growth rates in this region, or are growing at a slow rate. It is largely because of this. So when we get this, every time this cost of living increasing from the other side, they don't look at the inflation rate. If APNU was there, you couldn't avoid this. And we're growing. Our inflation rate is now hit by something outside of, or most countries have been hit by something outside of a domestic driven inflation. We've had in the COVID period the price of every commodity escalating because of stop in production. Oil prices, when Indonesia and Malaysia stopped exporting oil, a bottle of oil went up by 300% because they stopped exporting, and they were supplying 60% of the world oil, cooking oil. That's just clear. The price of freight to bring in one container of goods from China, and we import a lot from China. A 40-foot container went from $3,500 to $20,000 US in the COVID period. It fell. Then we had the issue in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, and now with the Houthis attacking vessels in the Red Sea, the price has gone back to $20,000. It fell down. It gone back to $20,000 for one container US dollars when it was $3,500. We have had to contend with all of that because every time that goes up, it increases the cost. And notwithstanding all of that, we have kept our average inflation rate below even regional average. And why did this happen? What did we do? And all of the variables. So I see Starbucks News going out, this thing they have, and they go to some elderly people and say, because they see it as a political issue. They say it as the cost of living gone up, and so what is your view on it? What's your view on it? But they don't say what we had to contend with, and they don't say that the cost of living is made up of many things. So cost of living is one, your utility bills, transportation, etc. Let's talk a bit about this. Utility bills and how other countries have fared. You've had a massive increase in transportation costs in countries in this region and the price of electricity and water supply. If you check, just go and Google that and you see almost all the countries in the region have done this because fuel prices went up. So how did we in Guyana deal with this? And what did it cost the Treasury? How did we deal with it, and what did it cost the Treasury? And how was it any different than other countries? So the first question is electricity prices, when all the other countries are increasing it. I've said this before, that when GPL budgeted this year, their fuel costs to break even so that they can cover their recurrent costs, not the capital costs, because everybody knows that the capital cost for GPL is funded by the government. We're funding the gas to energy project, we're funding the upgrade of the transmission system, the control center, all the capital costs of GPL is funded fully from the Treasury, and that has grown into billions of US dollars because we're preparing a modern grid. Last week I spoke of that. So forget the capital costs. Let's put that aside, the recurrent costs. They budgeted $70 US dollars per barrel of fuel, weighted average for this year to break even. The weighted average this year is, because they import all of this fuel, is $104. So when you calculate the volume, so that's like 34 US dollars more per barrel that they didn't budget for. So when you calculate the volume that they import minus times 34, you run up to 60-something million US dollars. I pointed out that we are going to the Treasury for supplementary for 60-something million. That means we are putting in a subsidy of 66 to 70 million US dollars this year into GPL to pay for fuel. Because if we don't do that, what will happen? They'd have to increase the electricity prices to people to cover that increase in fuel costs that they have to import. So immediately, the government has to put in 70 million US dollars to keep prices constant. Who benefits from this? That is a subsidy of $70 million to the people of this country, to the business community and ordinary people. Next year, we reduce the price even further. But we could have easily done, on the afternoon, look at what? The prices were like $30 a barrel for fuel. $30 in the first year they got back, the prices fell, fuel costs. Where do you think that? That's part of cost of living. Assuming the electricity prices have gone up, it would push the cost of living. We kept that constant at a cost of nearly 70 million US dollars. So that is when the reporter from Sabbath News or others put their microphone to the people and say, what do you think about this cost of living or the government doing? They don't ever say that. Are you aware that the government is putting 70 million US dollars into subsidizing electricity, so electricity prices don't move when it's skyrocketing in all the other countries because of increased costs? They don't say that. The second thing is oil imports. So we imported, say 2023 alone, take 2023 prices. We imported about 1.3 million, a lot liters. So we look at liters basically of fuel. So 1.3 trillion meters of, actually it's billions of liters of fuel. So let me convert this to gallon because it might be easier this way. So if you take out the fuel, we are just looking at two elements of our import mix of fuel because we import LPG and a whole range of things. That's cooking gas, and we import bunker C for GPL. So let's take diesel and gasoline because most people use that. So if you take that and you take out GPL imports 195,000 or so barrels of diesel, Bosai 116,000 barrels, and 64,000 or so come in for the Trawlers Association, and those are duty free. So if we take those out, we have about 6 million barrels per year of gasoline and diesel. There was a 50% excise tax. So if you convert 6 million barrels into money, how much you have to pay, and you take 50% of this, which is the excise tax that was there, it works out to 384 million US dollars. That's the tax. We remove that. 384, that's 80 something, over 80 billion Guyana dollars. And who benefits from this? The people of this country. So let me tell you, per gallon, if we had not removed that, every Guyanese citizen who owns a car or runs a business would have had to pay $500 more per gallon of diesel, or 500 more on average per gallon of gasoline. Just think about that. 500 Guyana dollars more every time you put a gallon of gasoline in your vehicle, which works out to just 100 and some Guyana dollars per liter. Every time you fill up your tank, you have to pay. So if you put 5 gallons of gas in your tank, you have to pay $2,500 more. Every Guyanese have benefited from this. You don't hear about that. But what if the other countries have kept their taxes because they need it for the budget? Here we have taken off over $80 billion of taxes, and it goes straight back into the pockets of the people of this country through their vehicle daily purchases. If we hadn't done that, first of all, your costs would have gone up. Everyone's costs would have gone up. It would have added to the cost of living. And then immediately, the transportation costs would have gone up. So transportation costs is part of cost of living too. Your cost of movement is part of it. And that's how we dealt with it. And there's been very little. But it cost the Treasury 80 billion Ghana dollars, or over 380 million US dollars. Do they ever say this to the people they go out to? Some of the reporters who do this story. Do you know that the government is putting back or foregoing $80 billion so that the price of gasoline and diesel would be $500 per gallon less? Nobody talks about that. That's part of cost of living too, and that is how the government has directly intervened, unlike many other countries. That's why we have, in spite of the large demand, as I spoke of, demand outstripping supply in the economy, the inflationary pressures, and imported inflation, we have kept our inflation figures below regional average. The third element is water. We dropped the water rate by 5% since we got into office. We dropped the rate by 5%, although our costs have gone up enormously. The cost of everything has gone up for the supply of water. People don't pay more for water now than they were paying in 2020. So imagine you had an increase in water rates to reflect the cost. I'm not speaking even about the capital cost, because we're spending over $200 million US for these new water treatment plants, the 13 of them that would provide better treated water to our people, to cleanse the iron out of the water in some areas, to expand hinterland water access. Forget all of that, that's capital. I'm talking about just the supply of water. We've had an increase in the price of the alum, everything that you import to produce the water. But we have the price today for water supply is 5% lower. The rate is 5% lower than in 2020. So when you take these three elements alone, look at the intervention that the government has done. So that's one issue. That never gets communicated to people. Oh, they say, oh, the price of bora went up, so what do you think about cost of living? You know, the price of something went up. That is not how you measure it. You have to do it comparatively and in a sensible way too. And then you see the dedicated plan and the efforts we have made. But it's nuanced. But it done politically to stir up this thing, or government not doing anything about it. Let's go. The same one editorial in Stabrook spoke about the president in his address talk about disposable income. Now we put out a document. I don't want to go through that again. I did this here before. I gave you a document. I asked the media to carry it to show that since we got into office, through three agencies, there are three elements of the public sector: the central government, public corporations, and statutory bodies. Wages and salaries, remuneration, benefits have gone up by $90 billion in those 4 years. That's how much more people in the public sector are getting. $90 billion. And you are still questioning, how come the president talk about increasing disposable income, and where is it? Where is it? And I gave you a handout at one of my press conferences to show you the agencies and how it increased. And it's easily checked if you go to the budget. It's easily checked. But that, again, they question it again. Where is it? That's the increase in disposable income, because we've increased even the tax threshold. But that is how much. And when you consider that all the oil money in this year's budget is $300 billion, and that the public sector workers will get $90 billion more per year than they were getting in 2020, then you see the effort there to raise disposable income. The pensioners, I pointed out here, we're spending $20 billion more nearly on pensions. That's $20 billion per year more in the pockets of our pensioners than they were getting in 2020. And you're still questioning where are these government efforts? Where do you think the 15,000 the part-time workers who are getting close to $10 billion, that's disposable income increasing it. And then at the national level, I pointed out that you have more than 60,000 new people working too, because of efforts to create more jobs that we promised to do, because APNU was doing a terrible job at it. We are losing welfare and jobs in the 5 years. And the 60,000 people who are working now, who are not working then, I'm not even mentioning those who lost their jobs because of COVID. I'm talking about other people. They earn too. They earn. That's disposable income. If you're not working before, you don't have money. You don't have disposable income. And we still get this question in. Where is this? It is so. You have to almost every week be at this to deal with this kind of thing. Oh, pepper price went up. Now, we understand that. I talk to people about this. I know that is something, that's why we set aside resources this year to help other people. The farmers, we help them with the fertilizer to offset costs, because fertilizer is directly linked to the price of oil. It's derived from gas and other stuff. So we help them to reduce cost of inputs so that the profit margin, which is already very thin for the farmers, that it can grow and they get more disposable income. We're targeting different groups, and we will help people. We have to do that. But you have to see the big picture and how we manage this. And very few governments in the world, and definitely not APNU, they're even clueless, or AFC, even clueless to even talk about this, would have navigated this complex era and the complex set of circumstances in that manner that I just pointed out to you. We're increasing supply responses. So that's why we want more food production, so you can keep the price of food down. It's not just because you want to increase the farmers. You have to have a supply response for growth in demand, and that's the only long-term sustainable thing. So you can't say, oh, we're concerned about food prices and don't help to produce more. That's what we did in aggregates. We're doing it sand. We're helping the farmers to produce. That's why you talk about hydroponics and shade houses and all of these things. So if more people get involved, you can attenuate prices through higher levels of production. These are the issues. And it's almost burdensome every week, but we have to do it. We're politicians, so sometimes even the newspaper editorials and stuff like that, some of them, they see an issue that people complain about, so they jump on it opportunistically, vulture-like, without conveying to the people all that is being done elsewhere. When you have our children, if you had to pay to go to UG and now the government removes your payment, that helps you too. If you had to pay for an MRI, a CT scan in the past, and you're going to have 12 new hospitals with CT scans right across the country. Now you can go in and get it for free in a public hospital. Then it reduces costs to people. That's it. If you have, in these 12 hospitals, we'd have like maybe 30 new operating theaters right across the country, so people can get access to surgery and all of these things cheap, faster, and without paying a cent for it, and a higher quality of surgery. That's what we're working on. And it's a complex issue. So we'll come back to it, because I have no doubt that they will continue with this. They think this is the one thing that they can probably mobilize people. Look at Ghana. Not Ghana, Kenya. So they see riots in some countries because of cost of living, and they think they can replicate that or create dissatisfaction. But a lot of the countries have not dealt with it in the manner that we have dealt with empathy and with a clear-cut vision as to how to tackle it, and to make sure that we keep increasing disposable income, but we absorb some of the costs that people would have to face to the Treasury. They don't even see it. Like, many people don't go down the road thinking that every time I buy a gallon of gas, it's $500 of subsidy I'm getting here. Who thinks that? Or when you pay your electricity bill in a month, people complain, oh, the blackout is, and it is bad. But they don't hear that, oh, this is $70 million US more because fuel prices went up. I don't have to pay here for electricity prices. Or water. When people use water, they think, oh, it costs much more to produce the water than I'm paying for. People don't think that. So I saw there are a lot of been talk about elections. Some parties saying that, oh, we have early elections. Don't worry with them. They're just like wasting time. Elections are going to be held towards the end of next year. It's October, November 2025. So all of those who are trying to stir Nigel Hughes, I heard, said, oh, there'll be early elections. It's just like a bunch of nonsense. So every time we go out, they think it's for elections. But we've been going out all the time, because that's what we believe in, servicing people. The president has been out there on the road, engaging communities. This is a standard thing. We know, like Granger, you got a cardboard cutout engaging people. We have a different sort of president and cabinet and government. Every day they're out there, they absorb all the heat, we absorb the lies too. Look at the thing. I heard this useless mayor, Obra, just now gone to Kurukururu, where there is a private man with a private land, and he's putting some people off the private land. And suddenly it's a big bad PPP government that is throwing these people off the land. But if you think about vultures, they're only preying on people's misery. They're not going there to help, you know. They would never go there to help. It's a political issue. It's a political issue. You think when they went to Sierra Leone, which is another situation similar, private, not government, they made it seem as though it is the government throwing the people off, when we are actually helping the people to try to get plots of land elsewhere that they would have never gotten help on. And I gather the transport, the man got his transport for that land in 2019 under the PNC and AFC. And then they opportunistically ran down there to say, look, big bad PPP throwing these people off their land. Not us throwing nobody off their land. So that's what they do all the time. Nothing else. So they think that anyhow, they're probably worried about it. So we've been talking about with various groups, international organizations. The Carter Center was here. I met with them, and I saw a number of parties meeting with them, and I share their views. I saw Timothy Jonas saying that The system is basically transparent. However, there are a couple of things that they advocated for, which is removing dead people from the list, and also that SOPs must be released after the count is done. So I just want to repeat, and we share that view, and because we share the view, that's why we amended the Representation of People Act to make this the law. And so if you don't do it, it's an offense. So under what is being advocated for is part of the law, the amended act, that when the count is done at the polling place and the parties have their SOPs, they have to now upload the statements electronically, so the whole country would see this before you start finalizing the tabulation at the regional level and declaring the results at the regional level. So on the night of the election or the next morning, every Guyanese, long before they tabulate GCOM, every citizen should have a copy of every statement of poll, and they can do their own additions and decide who won the elections or not. Every citizen, because they're by law now. It's a new 83B of the Act says that failure to post a copy of a statement of poll or posting of a poll is an offense, right? And it must be, it says, provides for the returning officer and the supernumerary returning officer in the case of a sub-district on receipt of the statement of poll to post an electronic copy of it onto the Commission's website to be publicly viewed. So it's already, I saw Anuk saying that they are advocating for that. That's part of the law already. That's what we went through, all of the things where there could be room for ambiguity or capricious action on the part of the CEO or other staff of GCOM, and we clarify them and we ensure so that they're clear to everyone, and we put in offenses for not doing what you should do, so people can suffer consequences should they depart from a transparent system of elections. And crucial to all of this effort would be the production of a manual now, months before the elections, available to the press, the political parties, and everyone, so you can long before the elections see the roles, the duties, obligations, responsibilities, rights of every member who will be part of the conduct of elections, both from the side of the political parties and GCOM. So we will know what the polling agents are entitled to. For example, we've always had disputes that some presiding officers would say, oh, you can't keep the tally sheet, which is their tally sheet. And then another set say, you can keep it. That's the polling agents of the party. It's their right to keep their own tally sheets and stuff. Then we'd have a situation like what happened on the East Coast. You remember APNU was saying, oh, they're missing documents in the box. So what happened in the afternoon now, most of the boxes around the country had all of the requisite documents. In the afternoon, somehow either the CEO or Mingo called maybe about 50 people on the East Coast, presiding officers, and say, you keep those documents and bring them to the commission. Don't put them in the box. So they turned up at the commission building and the RO office with these stacks of paper that we have on videotape, handed them over to GCOM or to the RO, Mingo and the others. Then when the recount took place, then the APNU is saying, oh, those documents are missing. They're not in the boxes like the others around the country because the instruction was changed. Now, in this manual that you will see before the elections, long before the elections, you will see which document has to go into the box and which doesn't have to go. So if the presiding officer now doesn't want to put it into the box, he's creating an offense. So you don't have room for people calling up the last minute and saying, oh, you changed this, that creates confusion subsequently. A lot of that has been clarified in the new law. So we are hoping to have a transparent elections. APNU will continue to make excuses. That's their modus operandi. They will come in, they will make, oh, it's a list, it's something else, the Venezuelans that we're bringing here to win the elections, all sorts of things, the usual, they've started at it. There's never been an election in this country that I'm aware of where APNU doesn't make excuses before and after when they lose. And even the excuses were there before 2015, but they didn't say anything about it in 2015. The same list that we're using now, we used in 2015. The same, exact same list. So I'm not too bothered about APNU, etc. So I saw Exxon through Alistair Rutledge speaking on this matter that has been in the public domain for the past several weeks. And he represents Exxon Mobil here in Guyana, and therefore he's entitled to his views. But if he thinks that his expression that there is no conflict between the two parties or conflict of interest involved here is a view that would prevail with us, he'd better think again. So the obscenity of it is he is a conflicted party. Exxon is a conflicted party itself. So it is like you have a conflict between two parties, and the two parties saying, oh, we're not conflicted. What else do you expect them to say? So it's like they want to judge their own conflict, whether there is a conflict of interest here. And they can't do that. Exxon is a conflicted party too, because they have on their payroll in the country of Guyana the leader of a political party that is represented in the National Assembly, that has a number of seats in the National Assembly, and therefore in a position to have a say on policies. That's their first issue. Secondly, they have a payment stream to this individual. Exxon pays Nigel Hughes ostensibly for legal services, but we don't have in the public record how much they pay him. That figure could easily be inflated for work not done and may have all the bearings of a legal payment, but it is a political contribution to him and his party to ensure that the interests of ExxonMobil is protected in any future government or even in the National Assembly now. How is this not a conflict of interest? Maybe Exxon has worked this way in other countries in the world. They like to say, oh, we haven't done that in other countries. When we were putting in place the environmental tax that they said, oh, we have never done that elsewhere. And my position was, if you didn't do it elsewhere, doesn't mean that this will not happen in Guyana. In Guyana, you would have to comply with it, because your excuse of not having to comply with a similar arrangement elsewhere doesn't hold any water with us. And we proceeded with putting in place the environmental tax. The same thing happened when we were pursuing the local content law. And that might have been the reason why APNU passed it, because they were very resistant to it. And we said, not because this law, you don't have to comply with a similar law in some of your other jurisdictions. That's an excuse for us not passing the law. And we forged ahead, we passed the law, and they had to comply with it. And today, 1,600 Guyanese companies now are benefiting, not based on the largesse or the goodwill of ExxonMobil, but by law they have to comply with and present these opportunities only to our people. So I said, you will hear more, or ExxonMobil will hear more on this matter from us at the appropriate time and place. Today is not the time and place, but they will hear from us. We believe it's a serious case of conflict of interest. It is paying for influence in policies. And even now, the obscenity of it all. Oh, if I become president, then I will exit this relationship. So he has now to deflect attention from all of this. The AFC has been embarked on a deception. They've deceived the people of this country many times before. They deceived us with that Cummingsburg Accord. They deceived the country with the manifesto that they put forward in 2015. Cathy Hughes and many of the others deceived the country, but she deceived when she said to the newspapers and the public, I've left Video Mega from the time I became minister. I've exited the company, and we later found out that she was signing checks on behalf of the country 3 years later, and in her own ministry approving business for the company. And then she signs a check on behalf of the company. This was 3 years after she said publicly, I no longer have any part of this company, I've recused myself, I've exited the company. We've heard this before. So you can imagine why no one would believe Nigel Hughes when he says this. How could you, as leader of a party, not pay attention or talk about oil and gas now in this contemporary context, when that's one of the most topical issues, and you farm it out, you say, here is a three-persons committee that will talk about oil and gas. And look at the people he put there. It's the recycled people again. We know Patterson, one of the most corrupt individuals here, and that's been demonstrated over and over, and he has to face charges before the court. He talks about moral revival. Shamir Ali, I didn't even know he was convicted or something. I saw a news report. But he is from another era. And his claim to fame was they had put him in Kuwait in the last government as ambassador. He is recycled AFC. And Vince Adams was there, who signed on to, I think it's like the environmental permit, who is a sycophant, who presents himself as the great technical person, the conscience of Guyana and the oil and gas industry. And he signed on to this mediocre environmental permit when he had the power to produce a different one, or to hold the company to the account. And now I hear them saying some perfunctory words, oh, we may want to renegotiate, we support the government. Prevarication, all sorts of prevarication. All of the prevarication, imagine they were to win and Nigel Hughes becomes the president. You think anything they say now will matter? He will just say, oh, my client's interest, would they continue? They may even continue to pay him if he becomes president. We've had one case where a president of Guyana, prime minister of Guyana, was on the payroll of an external spy agency 6 years after he became the prime minister of Guyana. And you know that it's now in the public domain, it's revealed. People don't pay attention to that. Burnham I'm talking about. Go and check the releases that were made from papers in that period, because, you know, under the Secrecy Act, that the term has expired now. So now the source documents are being revealed. He was on the payroll of the CIA for years after he became prime minister. So forgive me if I don't believe Nigel Hughes. The history of his party, the history of his, well, Cathy Hughes herself, don't inspire much confidence in us. And so we believe, and what else? You know, why would you have to lie so blatantly if you didn't have things to hide? He's been trying to sidetrack us away from this issue all the time. Oh, they said Jagdeo was afraid of Nigel Hughes because I held 2 press conferences. I held one press conference last week, and I gave some comments. But trust me, he'll get a lot of attention because I love Nigel Hughes, not because I hate him. He'll get lots more attention from us. 5 press conferences, maybe 10, because we will keep pointing out what he wants to hide. Not because we are afraid of Nigel Hughes. Nigel Hughes was there in the period when we were in opposition. We didn't have any, they had control over everything. And we won the elections then. And we won the elections with Nigel Hughes and his fancy mathematics and everything else. All of them were aligned against us. And what would we be afraid of from this Nigel Hughes, who's been our opponent throughout, who's been lying to the people of this country blatantly throughout his entire political career? Who was not a new person. He was chairman of AFC twice. So who would be afraid of Nigel Hughes? The attention we're giving him is because of the obscenity of their position. We want to point out that AFC is an obscene party. The man says minutes after he was elected, I will put ExxonMobil's interest above that of the national interest. That must be music to the ear of ExxonMobil. Whatever they say about us, they always say we're in Exxon's pocket, etc. That's what they would love to think. But we have strong positions. We defend what we believe is good for Guyana. So if we say we want to increase oil production in this era with climate change, it's because we are convinced that it's good for Guyana, and and our interests coincide with that of ExxonMobil and the others. And that's why we defend it. But they don't have anybody from the government of Guyana on their payroll. We take this conflict of interest issue seriously. There was one current minister who was doing business with ExxonMobil before he became a minister. And I remember 2 days after President Ali was sworn in, he was invited to the office of the president. We were in a meeting, we were looking at the cabinet, naming the cabinet, and the option was put starkly to him. You either stay out the cabinet or you continue, you disassociate yourself if you want to be a minister. And so we take this seriously since then. And that is why we're speaking about it. Because imagine in the National Assembly, when we go with the environmental law and everything else, we don't know what the AFC position is. They'll be coming from their leaders. Don't listen to you. Oh, I recuse myself. The man is a blatant liar. A liar. Can you imagine someone appears at the press conference and says, I do not handle the ExxonMobil portfolio. That is handled by another person in my firm. Clear as daylight. There's no conflict of interest, although that is not in itself excuse because you own part of the company, so the benefits come to you. But he says clearly to the people of this country, I don't handle this portfolio, it's handled by another person. And then, look at this. Eight days before, Nigel Hughes is there on a court case with Raymond Gasket versus Minister of Natural Resources and others. I can play you the recording where Mr. Pollard said he is in association with Nigel Hughes and they're appearing for the added respondents, which are ExxonMobil, Hess, and Sinop. You can listen to the tape yourself. And he denies this like he forgot 8 days before he appeared for ExxonMobil. And he says at the press conference, I don't deal with that portfolio at all. Blatant lie. And how do you get away from that sort of thing? How do you get away from that sort of lie? So when asked about, just to show you a few inconsistencies, he was asked about something about the projects. And he said, oh, this government, he was asked, I think by the Kaichor News, about the feasibility study for projects. And he said, oh, this government is bad. It doesn't do feasibility studies. It was for the gas to energy project, the monetization of the gas, that project that we spoke of here a lot, where Fulcrum was selected as a partner to engage with Exxon and the government of Ghana to see if we have a viable project. So not that we are putting money, obviously didn't read this stuff. So we don't know whether we have a project as yet. The government of Guyana has made it clear we're not putting any money into this project. But we have to explore whether we can develop a viable project now, so that means the feasibility studies, everything else, to see if we can monetize the gas that we have, the associated gas, outside of the gas that's coming to the power plant. So we hired this firm. We're going to look at all the streams of benefit from maybe LNG export, from bringing the gas onshore for electricity or industrial development. All of that would have to be explored before you move to say, we have a project, it's viable, and then we move to get it financed. But it's not financed from the government of Guyana. So obviously he didn't read anything about it. So he chose to make a general comment. He makes general comments like this. Oh yes, government basically has this proclivity, implying that the government has a proclivity for doing this, and naming the Skeldon factory. So, you know, we've taken a lot of heat because of that Skeldon factory, and the same issue came up, and I had to deal with that maybe a couple months ago. First of all, they keep saying there was no feasibility study done by the government. So if you go to Booker Tate website now, I can send you the link, you will see that they said in the year 2000 that the government of Guyana asked them to do a viability, which is a feasibility, and expansion study, and they did it. So we asked, Booker Tate did the feasibility study for us. It's on their website. That was the era when there was a change in the common agricultural policy in Europe, and they were moving, they're trying to get rid of the preferential market that we have for sugar. Remember when they cut their price, the procurement price for sugar, we used to get preferences before. We lost about 40 million US dollars because of lower prices. So they did that. So first of all, there was a study done. Two, we hired as a government, so we hired Booker Tate to do the study. We hired them to oversee the contract. They had to now look at the Chinese contractor, they assessed the bids when they came in, and to deal with the design and supervision. So they had to approve designs and supervise to see we had a viable project. They did not do their work. So we refused to pay them for some of the supervision work. They went to court. And in 2015 or 2016, I think it was, they got a judgment under APNU against us. And guess who was their lawyer? Nigel Hughes. Nigel Hughes was the lawyer. So he just said here that we didn't do a feasibility study. His client, the Booker Tate, did the study. And two, he defended them against the government of Guyana when we said they should not be paid. They got a judgment, they got a favorable ruling in court, but they didn't appeal it. Remember, at that time, the Minister of Agriculture was also an AFC member. Imagine the Minister of Agriculture, an AFC member, and fighting against Nigel Hughes, who is the chairman of the party, who is a lawyer for the company. I believe that the reason there was no appeal because we had a strong case and we lost money because of that Skeldon factory. Booker Tate did not do their work because we are not technical people, we're politicians. We hire the people to supervise the work to see that the factory works. We lost out on it. So how could you believe such a person? And by the way, if he believes that the gas to energy project is not a good one, that means his client, Exxon, is funding part of the pipeline or part of the pipeline, a project that may not be feasible. Did he say that to his client when he gave them the advice? It's just all very conflated. And so you will see an attempt by Nigel Hughes to talk about everything under the sun except this obscene conflict of interest where he wants to put money above national interest, the opportunism. He doesn't want that. He wants this to go away. So he's going to comment on Sarah Joanna, on mathematics, CXC mathematics, although I don't think he would pass if 33, he thinks that 34 is the majority of 65. He would comment on everything under the sun. And his fake committee will, the oil and gas committee will come up with all kinds of positions to create this facade, this air, we are taking a strong national interest. Just our leader can't speak on it. Imagine that. and so they're masterful at trickery and sidetracking people. And he'll get the psychophants jumping in. Anand Gulsaran, the conscience of the country, although he himself was conflicted in the past when he got AFC, the APNU win the elections, and he got a contract without bidding and illegally awarded because under the law that he's so proud of when he was Auditor General, it says that any contract for the audit of public accounts have to either be approved by the Auditor General or the Public Accounts Committee of the Parliament, not by the minister. He got a contract from the minister to do audit, illegally so. Now, he jumped in now. You're going to see all the fossils weighing in. GHK Lal and everybody, they're crying, this is, anyhow, let me just leave it like crying. It's very amusing when I read what they're writing. Of course, I get the brunt of the cussing, which is normal, but they're disappointed. They shouldn't be disappointed. They should know that's the nature of the creature that we're dealing with. It has happened many times before. I'm not even going to deal. I'm saving. More must come. Better will come to later when we have a ton of other things that we'll talk about. But I just wanted to deal with this conflict of interest issue. Here are lots more we'll talk about a bit later. I think I should really end there. Thank you. I have some more to go on, but maybe it's going to go too long today. Yeah. I didn't see Oil Now write about the conflict of interest.
Good afternoon, Vice President Kemal King for Oil Now. What has been the decision on CGX Energy?
So I do hope that Oil Now would write on the conflict of interest too, because it gets a global resonance. But on that matter, I told you the last time, the CGX issue, that it will go to the cabinet. So the Minister of Natural Resources is presenting a paper to the cabinet, and the cabinet will pronounce on it. I don't know if they did today, because the cabinet is held on Thursday mornings, and most times I miss them. So that is going to happen there. Whenever the cabinet decides on it, but right now everything is at a standstill until the cabinet decides how to proceed with the matter.
Okay, has the government abandoned the development of the gas strategy for now?
No, we're still working on it, but as you've seen, we've moved forward in the project that we wanted to check the viability for. We've moved forward in that, but the gas strategy is a clear one. Let me, in a nutshell, let me say to you, here, key elements of the gas strategy would have been how we monetize the gas. The associated gas that we're talking about outside of the supply to the pipeline, the current pipeline that we're building. And we've moved forward on that element of it. And then the first 50 million cubic of gas comes in to generate power. We may have another 70 million cubic or so, 70, 80 million cubic to come in on that pipeline. We have to now make a determination how we would utilize that. It could be for generating additional power, fertilizer, different things. So really, normally a gas strategy is about trying to determine how you will not just monetize it, but use it for national development, the reservoir of gas. So but we're working on it. It's not an abandoned project.
Okay. Would you say that the government is spending a substantial portion of its revenues from oil on climate mitigation and adaptation? And before you answer, would you say that the mitigation projects that you have planned, like sea defenses and canals, are sufficient to respond to coastal vulnerability to rising sea levels?
The current projects are funded mainly from the budgetary resources and from money earned through the sale of forest carbon, the current projects. We believe that locally, that Exxon is not doing enough on the climate side, that we had movement on Hess, with Hess through that arrangement, and the same thing with Sinnock. They're not doing enough. The three co-venturers. Hess made a massive investment here by the purchase of this forest carbon. It's not being mirrored by Sinnock or Exxon. So whether the efforts could prevent all climate-related events in the future, I doubt it, but it would seriously enhance our capability of handling more water, which is crucial in the times of drought. That is to conserve water and to supply the water to our farms and communities, and to handle excess water in times when we have like intense rainfall. So seriously, and then on the mangrove program, etc., could help us to probably tackle a bit more of some of the threats that we face from the sea. But I doubt it would stop every climate-related event. We'd still have stuff like, you have occasional flooding in communities. Sometimes it's not the bigger drain. Sometimes you have a drain clog. Sometimes you have the rainfall in a short period is so intense it overloads the drainage system. But that's been routine, and that's been a very, very long term historically, because we are still below sea level on the coast. So you do have those challenges, or we were settled along the coast with these big challenges. So, but here with the capacity that I mentioned earlier, we will vastly improve the way we manage water. Those two Hope-like canals in regions 5 and 6 will allow us to manage a lot of the waters that come down from the backlands when they come down from the highlands or the savannas, and we have to drain the water through the current drainage system that might be already overloaded with heavy rainfall, might be swollen with heavy rainfall. Therefore, we can't drain the water from the backland. So having a canal like the Hope Light Canal allows us to do that without bringing the water through the villages and the cultivations, and because the water gets drained directly into the Atlantic. So it helps. It would help a lot our capabilities.
Okay, why I asked is because you've often talked about how the developed countries are not providing the aid that they promised,
Yeah.
and you have presented Guyana producing oil as a way to get money to adapt and mitigate.
Yeah.
Do you see that as an irony going to the sector that's often blamed as being part of the problem?
Well, no, because in any case, the world still needs fossil fuel. And we made it clear that the oil produced in Guyana is one of, well, if you can say cleanest, but you can't say it's not carbon free, but because it's light sweet crude, it has less of an environmental footprint than oil produced in many parts of the world. That's the first point. Secondly, from the justice perspective, that the developing world, if there is any need in the long run to supply to fossil fuel because of a retention of demand way into the future, that the bulk of that supply must come from the developing world, because the developed world has been doing this for centuries, and they have used this as a source for their industrialization and growth of welfare. It's a turn of countries in Africa and maybe Guyana and Suriname and the newly emerging producers. So from the justice perspective. And then that the resources that we use, we can't just use them wantonly like so many other countries have used when climate was not a variable in the development equation. So they used it for everything else except climate, that we will use our resources for a multiplicity of objectives, which is education, better health care, better infrastructure for our people, some assistance to vulnerable groups in our country, making our country less vulnerable to to environmental disasters, etc. So it is in that holistic context that we see this, our public pronouncements. And it is a credible position. We can do so with great credibility globally because we have held consistent our pre-oil positions. And our pre-oil positions were: one, we support a global price on carbon. Two, we support early decarbonization of the world. Three, that we believe that they should remove all subsidies from the production of fossil fuel. We have not changed our position on that. And then fourth, the most important issue is that we're already at net zero when you look at our forests, which is a huge carbon sink, and that even with us producing 1.6 million barrels per day, that we'd still remain a net carbon sink. That is where countries are now aspiring to be by 2050. We're already there. So for those reasons, we have a very, very credible position here and globally.
Thank you. Finally, was the decision to build Silica City one of, like, an answer to the question of how to build Guyana's climate resilience?
Silica City, partly, but also we need growth in a dispersion of the population, because right now everyone wants to come to this small area around the city, and their resources, land resources, etc., are limited. So we believe that the bridge, the new facility that's being built offshore, the wharf, etc., that massive land reclamation project, the power plant at Wales would lead to massive industrialization in Region 3, and you've seen it already. Region 4 has the largest population, followed by Region 3. The bulk of our people live in these two regions. So you're going to see along the highway from Crane to the bridge, major developments taking place and in the region. So that opportunities are going to be afforded to people to live, work, leisurely opportunities, shopping malls, hotels, all to people in different parts of the country, wherever they live. They don't have to come into the city for everything. On the East Coast corridor, by building that 4-lane road from Sheriff Street to Mahaika, and we have a densely populated area, the East Coast, it would also start. You have some shopping malls going up in Mahaika now, major ones, and right along the way. So you're going to see, because the time taken from Mahaika to Sheriff Street now on a 4-lane road coming into the city may be about 20 minutes, because you have more people would be able to live in further area. The same thing on the East Bank. As you go out with a 4-lane road, you hit the highway, people can now live on the highway, because it would be a drive of about 30 minutes coming into the city, and you'd have industrialization taking place along the entire corridor of the road. So people, more jobs, etc., will be out there. So this is part of our plan for the entire country. I don't want to outline the other areas. So Silica City is partly response for climate, but a lot of it is also dealing with a spatial decentralization of development and developmental facilities. And that's why roads and power plants and transmission mains tend to be a precursor to the development effort. So when you see a highway and up, you say, oh, don't build highway, eat every cent of it. We have a plan as to what this highway would lead to. It's not just the drive on. It is about a whole community is being built around the highways, better access to land and better facilities for our people. So it's underpinned by this big vision.
Good afternoon, Dr.
Yes,
Jagdeo.
good afternoon.
I heard you mention that Dr. Adams signed the forest permit. Do you have any evidence that you could share with us that this is true? Because he has been claiming that he did not sign the
He didn't
LISA
sign
1.
anything?
He said he did not sign
Which
the
one did he
LISA
sign?
1 permit.
Huh?
He did not sign the LISA 1
Which
permit.
one he signed?
The second one. not
Oh, the
first.
second one, maybe it's my mistake. So he signed the second one, which was just as bad as the first one. And if he signed the second one, that's what he said. Thank you for clarifying this. I must apologize. He didn't sign the first one. Kaichor News is saying he signed the second permit. Now he had the benefit of hindsight to see how bad the first one was and to improve the second one. And he did a miserable job at it. He did a miserable job doing it. So thank you very much for proving that how miserable a job he did. And all you have to do to confirm the miserableness of the job is to take the permit that he signed and the ones that are currently produced. Go online and you see the vast difference in the permits. Thank you very much for clarifying that for me. I must thank Kaichor News for bringing that to my attention.
Okay. Does the government have done what's the real production cost for to produce a barrel of oil? Because we've seen Exxon said in 2020 it was $40 to break even. Hess told the shareholders it is 25, and they're pushing to get it lower down as 10. So does the government have an idea what is the real production cost at the moment?
Break-even cost is different. They announced this for different projects. The cost is different. So every one of the FPSOs had a different break-even cost. So you check that. So you could have that. For us, we look at the number of barrels produced we're entitled to X number of barrels, 12, well, of the 25% of the number. So if you produce 100 barrels, we're entitled, 75% goes to cost recovery, 25% is there for distribution. We get 12 and a half barrels for that. As our share, 50% share of the 25 barrels, and then we get another 2 barrels for the royalty. So we get 14 and a half barrels, and they get 10 and a half barrels, and that goes to profits. Later, that 25% will change, you know, as we clear out the costs. So because it's done based on barrels of oil produced, it's easier to track. It's not done on a financial variable where they sell all the oil and then we have to track just the price at which they sell the oil. Because we get our oil we get the oil, not like a financial flow from Exxon. Except I think for that is for the 12 and a half. That's for the 12.5%.
According to the EITI standards, countries can be suspending for failing to update its oil and gas reserve. Could this be a fate for Guyana, seeing that Exxon is continuously conducting appraisal activities in the Stabroek Block?
No, but you misread the whole EITI. A failure not to update, to give them the information, failure to supply the information on the reserves, and to update that whenever it happens. So we have what the last reserve numbers are based on the submissions from Exxon, and that would be available to EITI. If it's updated, then if you fail to submit the updated figure, then you could be sanctioned, but it's not like it's updated as yet. So that is the clarification.
The audit report, if the...
Oh, no. What update you wanted?
You finalize the second one. The one...
No. I don't have an update at this stage. I don't have an update on that.
And can you say when the gas to energy agreements will be laid in Parliament? Because we have asked the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs...
So that is precisely what they're looking at. Everything... The whole project, all the finances would be there, but you have to look at what's proprietary at this stage, and they should go through that review process and table it. We don't have anything to hide. You know what the numbers are already. They're going to be a contract. The biggest contract is about $761 million to build the NGL plant and the power plant. And then we have $160 million to do the transmission main from the power plant to the control facility, etc. And then I don't know, maybe about $20 million. I can't remember the figure for the control center. And then the pipeline is about $1 billion. So that's the key elements of the project. You just buttressed by the contract. I wonder if Nigel Hughes, as their lawyer of Exxon, has asked them to approve of them releasing the contract. As a lawyer, he has to give a sign off on it. Maybe he would sign off on whether you can get it.
Mr. Jagdeo, good afternoon.
Yes,
Can you say what is government's position on the confirmation of these deputy commissioners of police and senior promotions?
I know,
so?
and if it was discussed at cabinet, I was not there today, so I can't tell you about that, about the confirmation of. That's a matter that the president is dealing with directly. But so I don't know about whether there be a move to confirm them now or not.
Okay. Any particular reason, if no confirmation as to why
No.
they've been in?
I can't give a reason because I don't I don't know whether they'll be conform or not. So I can't give a reason for the confirmation or the non-confirmation here, because I don't know whether they'll be conform or not. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo, William Skytree News. Today, in a letter published by the newspaper, Dr. Vincent Adams, the former head of the EPA, is accusing government of tripling the coalition's required cap and stock deployment time to a cap well below from 3 days to 9 days.
I can't understand you, and I don't read that. Yeah, here, hopeless.
Dr. Vincent Adams,
yes.
is that better?
Oh, it's the same guy? Yeah.
He
Your
wrote a
friend.
letter saying that, well, accusing government of increasing the cap and stock time from 3 days during the coalition to 9 days. And he's saying that this would allow a potential extra 6 days of oil gushing into the sea if a well blowout occurs. Can you comment on this?
I doubt that that is accurate, but I'm not going to comment on any. You ask the head of EPA. Adams is, in my view, a total waste of time. Now he knows about cap and stock. You ask him about the permit that he signed, whether he had a cap and stock in the country at that time and made it a requirement. It was only the last permit that we issued, not the last one, the one before that, that we issued, that we had a requirement to have a cap and stock in the country. And one is here now, it came into the country so that you can deploy it immediately. So it's the immediacy of the deployment. If you had to, in the past, Exxon just had to keep a subscription abroad. Now we have one in the country. This clown is ignoring all of that. We have a cap and stock in the country. The last time I told you I had a report that it arrived in the country ahead of time, and that was a requirement of one of the environmental permits that we give. So if it's here now, we don't have to wait for it to be imported if there's a blowout of the well. It could be deployed immediately. He's quibbling about 9 days, 3 days, 2 days. You have it now to deploy immediately rather than waiting for it to be imported. So this is why they have a huge credibility gap. This guy is a politician. I don't like to waste my time behind people who suddenly become very erudite. And when they were there, they're useless, totally useless. He fits into that mold too. I don't waste my time on people like him.
Can you say if and when government would be proposing to fill the positions of the head of the Presidential Secretariat and the Cabinet Secretary?
Oh, really? There's nothing magical about that. The president determines the structure of his ministry, which is the presidency, and he determines the structure of his government. There's nothing magical about it. And so I believe that from the work done, you had, remember we had what they call him, Harman. What was Harman? I forgot his name. But they had a lot of people with designations, and what happened? We lost jobs. We increased taxes. We practically destroyed all the sectors of the economy by higher taxation and by harassing people. We didn't build no infrastructure. We screwed up on GPL. Basically, it was a useless government. But they had beautiful structures. They had really wonderful structures. They had, remember, one time they had about 40-something external advisors. You remember? Just Google that. Let's go back and look at the past. They name a long list of external advisors, a lot of sycophants that they brought back. They had Sarah, they had, everybody was responding, beautiful responses. They had all these structures, and they didn't have a single, maybe one press conference dedicated to oil and gas in 5 years. In 5 years, they didn't have a dedicated, but they had, but we can't fault them. They had a beautiful structure. You know, we don't work that way. We look at the effectiveness. We look at what we're sometimes irreverent to that, and that rubs all of these some of the do-gooders they are contrived do-gooders. It rubs them the wrong way. But we look at what's important to our people and we get it done. So there's nothing magical about that. Anything else? Well, thank you very much.